Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeffrey Peterson with mobile.co. That's the word mobile, M-O-B-I-L-E .co. Mobile.co is developing a social network that does a bunch of things you've never seen a social network do before. But one of the most important things it does is provide a transparent platform that will enable your freedom of speech. That means if you have legitimate political discussion, or if you just want to talk to your friends, like other social networks let you do, but especially if you have legitimate political discussion, you're not going to be deplatformed at mobile.co, as has been happening on some other social networks. We do a lot more than just social networks. By the way, if you're a follower of mine, you know that I was previously founder of a business called Que Pasa that built a big social network in the United States, primarily for the Hispanic market, but grew it to about 50 million users. Why is that important? There's only been a few truly big social networks in the history of the US that have grown to that size. And so our group, myself and Mobile's co-founder, Michael Silverman, and a bunch of other folks who you're going to meet soon, are pivoting around Mobile.co's business model. The business was started as a working online platform a number of years ago to solve some of the problems that are most important right now to users of social media. I have Tamara Leigh with me tonight, who is a very smart political analyst that's been active on social media for some time, who was deplatformed from Twitter, meaning her account was banned and shut down. We can't be sure why, but I think probably because she was a conservative. Tamara, how are you doing?
Hi, JP. Great to be here again with you. I am doing well.
This was not too long ago that you were shut down, right?
It feels like forever ago. It was last Memorial Day weekend. So essentially, all of the months leading up from the primary season to next week, Tuesday, the general election. So I had to rebuild. I started a new account, but they shut down my big account that had just hit 75,000 followers.
Yeah, you built your Twitter account with your own hard work over time, right?
About 3 years, specifically growing it through the MAGA movement in the 2015-2016 presidential election, being a vocal and proud supporter of President Trump, then candidate Trump. I initially started as it's my business at Tamara Leigh LLC was my Twitter hashtag. I started, I know, sometime after 2011, 2012, sometime in there, really jumped into it in the recent years with the political part, but it's my business account. I approached Twitter as a professional. It wasn't just my social chit-chat channel. It was for business purposes to engage and connect with people who then I could take those connections and transfer them or convert to work engagement. So I leveraged the platform that way, as well as it becoming very much my personal political viewpoints and support for President Trump.
But you were definitely using your Twitter account in a way that was professional conversation. You weren't engaging in any of this. There's these allegations that the social media founders are making that conservatives are engaging in hate speech. You weren't engaging in hate speech.
Not to the contrary. And that's why I was like, hey, I am like the least offensive person when it comes, because both can behave badly on both the right and the left. But I have a broader view of, I want to be on the platform where the conversation is happening, not just an echo chamber of like-minded opinions. I want that there are differing opinions on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you're having the chat.
So but let's get real. You're a Trump supporter. You're a Trump supporter.
I am.
and you were taken off the site.
Right.
And what other reason would you have? We don't see many liberals, let's face it, we don't see many liberals or Democrats that are being deplatformed the way conservatives are, right?
I don't know. Are they bots? I was shut down for being a bot. I'm so not a bot.
But it kind of sounds like an excuse, doesn't it? I just want to, for any of our followers that don't know this, I, aside from being a social network founder in my past, That's me, Jeffrey Peterson. You can read all about my exploits on Google. I used to be a member of the Democrat Party, and so I know a bunch of those people. And I still, if you're one of the people that I used to know, you'll know what this means. I'm still drinking my Fiji water. Not for the reasons I used to, but I just like good water. But that being said, I was very, very involved in the Democratic Party, and I'm not anymore because I see these kinds of things that are happening that to me are just strange, and they seem un-American, like censorship and deplatforming. It feels like we're in China or something. Sorry to any Chinese communists that are watching. I'm sorry, but it's just not the American way. Anyways, so you had used a flash tag, Tamara, that was like a General Flynn hashtag, right?
Right. So last spring with Pasquale Scopoliti, who is at Thy Consigliore on Twitter, we had worked on a hashtag campaign because I had been part of a group that kind of worked after the Georgia 6 special elections of how to really elevate hashtag campaigns, make them trend. So much so that Politico reached out, and I was interviewed in a couple of articles for them on how to leverage Twitter for getting those hashtags trending. And so Pat and I did a hashtag campaign. It's hashtag ClearFlynnNow, and there is on my blog at tamaraleeLLC.com. If you Google that, you can find out the analytics and the strategy that we employed. We didn't hide that. We shared that information. If the left wants to take it and use it, they can use that same strategy. I am all for the marketplace of ideas that people can assert their opinions. They can assert their point of views. Not all opinions are equal. However, you can say them and share them. And as kind of the free market idea, the better ones rise to the top and become accepted or hold to be true. I believe there's a role a devil advocate plays in the conversation. And so that was my approach with Twitter. And so not only was it right after the Clear Flynn Now hashtag campaign, but then it was also a weekend after I had interviewed mega candidates. I've hosted podcasts.
Do you believe there's Democrats that don't know what MAGA means? So I'm just gonna, I'm sorry, it's true. MAGA means, it's a movement.
Right.
For any of you that aren't familiar with the term, MAGA, it's Make America Great Again. But it's not for the people who are familiar with what that stands for. It's more than just a monolithic, unilateral, sort of blindly following the leader sort of thing. It's a deep belief that we love our country, and in a patriotic sense, we want to do everything possible to bring America back to some of its best years.
I would agree. MAGA transcends Trump. It definitely transcends his 2016 campaign to embrace all of the American people who want our country to, I think, align with the ideals that we believe fundamentally. But there's been a disconnect of what the reality of being American and what our belief system of what it is to be an American. And that disconnect happened maybe in part because of the Democratic Party, not to throw stones, but I might.
It's not our parents' Democratic Party. It's turned into this weird thing. And I say that as someone who saw it firsthand. I was around many of these top Democrats. And I know what's happened to the party. Hey, so let's, getting over to current events, how about some of the people who have been deplatformed recently? There's another fellow who was building an alternate social network based on freedom of speech called gab.ai. His name is Andrew Torba. He has been facing some resistance. What do you know about that, Tamara?
Well, I read today that his parents were terrorized as part of his shutdown. They are blaming wrongly that it was the temple shootings, I believe, that they are pinning on him because that person, it was either that, and I apologize for not being more clear, it was either the temple shootings or the bomb brouhaha of one of them would express their opinions on Gab platform. So they are holding Gab accountable for some person's actions that is wrong, but the true motive seems to be to have shut down Gab a week before the general elections, again, to censor and manipulate the outcome.
Okay, and there's a bunch of Google censorship that's happening as well. It seems like Google's going in and one of the strangest things is that I've noticed is it seems to be a coordinated effort between different businesses, different brands in the internet space, but that are somehow coordinating which accounts they choose to shut down. Have you noticed that?
Right. Well, isn't that one of the things with Gab? It was not just they were taken off their server, but PayPal stopped letting them do their processing. So it seemed a coordinated attack on Gab. And then in the last week, the other thing was Laura Loomer, who, I mean, she can get confrontational. That's just Laura's kind of, she has a hashtag Loomered, and she will kind of dish back to those who have been dishing it out to the conservatives. She gets back in people's faces, but she is doing it in a way that wasn't violating Twitter's terms of services either. And then there is Brian Kolfage, who was on with Huckabee, former Governor Huckabee, talking about Facebook took his platform, his account, and shut him down.
But
and he's a triple amputee veteran.
Yeah, unbelievable. I want to know why. And look, I've never made a claim to be anything even close to the most important person to speak about social media in the world, but there's only a few of us, I believe, in American history that have built big social media platforms. By big, I mean over 10, 20, 30 million concurrent active users. There's only a few of us who've done that. I think there's 20 or less of us in American history who've done that. And if someone wants to correct me on that, fine. I bet you there's not 50. I think it's actually less than 20. So as someone who has done that and ran that kind of a business for a long time, it's true that there are problem accounts that need to be shut down. But what I want to ask Jack Dorsey, who's someone I've met before, he's someone I've dealt with in business context before, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sit down and talk with him at some point in the upcoming year. And look, Jack is a smart programmer. I have a lot of respect for his technical skills. But what I want to ask Jack, because I respect the concept of being a liberal. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. There is a thing, especially in California, where I'm from. I was born and raised in California, about being a liberal and being a hippie and all this great stuff. I'm totally for it. I love trees. I've been known to hug them. Why will you build a platform, Jack, that will allow, and I've been shown in recent weeks, people have been showing me this stuff. I wasn't even aware of this. I will just say it this way: explicit imagery of adults. But you will not show a legitimate political debate if you don't agree with it. Like the images that are shown on Twitter that I will categorize as explicit adult imagery, we never would have shown on our social network, just out of pure policy. We never would have shown it. Those are very, very aggressive images to be showing, and Twitter openly displays them. Who is it that develops this arbitrary sort of policy that, on the one hand, we're going to show very bold, explicit images of a certain type, yet on the other hand, we're going to limit conservative conversations? I'm not sure what the purpose or logic for that would be. Do we have constitutional rights online? What are your thoughts on that, Tamara?
Well, that would be the question I would ask you as a developer. What should be the standard? I guess I would want to say most Americans, and Americans, this is typical of us, even when we travel. So we assume our constitutional rights go with us abroad. And that's somewhat of a false notion in terms of it's their country, their rules. So that same idea has been applied to the platforms. Like, they're a private company. You choose to be on there. It's their house, their rules. Now, is that true? As someone who has done that, I would turn that question back to you. Or as a way that I've looked at it and come to understand it with some legal input, not that I'm quoting him, but I had a conversation with, I would say, David Shistokas at Shistokas, SHESTOKAS, I believe is his Twitter handle. And he's an attorney and he has constitutional sound bites, and he's authored several books. And so this is sort of his wheelhouse. And he has said that there is, and I'm not going to quote him because I don't want to get in that legal turf, but does Twitter have some obligation when they invite you to their platform? They encourage you to invest your time, energy, talents, resources, etc., to build and grow your account. And then they, in turn, are able to monetize that for their ad revenue, saying we have this many followers, right? I mean, is that how the business model works? I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that was my understanding. So that then, is there some kind of fiduciary obligation? I don't know. That's maybe a different question than what you were asking me, but I think we as Americans assume that our constitutional rights follow us to that online engagement.
Yeah, there's a notion
in terms of privacy and free speech. So there's a two sides to that.
There's a notion amongst the internet founders that the social network itself is like a private business, and that we can allow or kick out anyone we want, which so far has not been legislated, and is, for those of us that believe in less legislation, less government interference, maybe it's a good thing to that extent. But I will mention briefly, to answer your question, there's one piece of important legislation that should be a part of this conversation. It's called the Communications Decency Act. It was passed in 1996, and I believe it's Section 230, that provides social networks and internet businesses a safe harbor for liability for the speech of the users. That means if there's a user that says or does something that is damaging or problematic, and this was like a very powerful thing for Silicon Valley when it was passed. The internet business itself is absolved of liability, and the liability falls on the user, not the internet business. That's in the U.S. Canada has similar laws that were passed in more recent years. So getting back to the question of constitutional rights online, this is something that is going to have to be addressed. There's different business models for different social networks, as you know. So far, many of them have been driven off of advertising models, which require billions and billions of microtransactions of viewed pages and events to make them viable. This is something that I've been moving away from philosophically, and this is where mobile.co is going to take a dramatically different approach than what's been seen so far from social networking businesses as the business evolves over time. Those of you that are watching, you need to know that mobile.co is a work in progress, and it's going to be built over time just because it has to happen that way. But we hope you'll be a part of it. So a bunch of things that are going to be totally different, and we would argue much better. There is something that has been happening called, have you heard of this, Tamara? Google Dragonfly?
Yes, I have. I tweeted out about it. With technology, the question to me is, just because we have something and can do something, which you can explain maybe more from the technical side of what the Google Dragonfly is, but just because we can do something, should we? That would be my question around it, because of the privacy issues.
Yeah, it is it's something that has been coming up in recent weeks. Also, you've heard of the social credit score.
Yes. I don't even like cameras on intersections, because, I mean, not that I want to break the law, but I just remember freedom. I don't know, that thing that used to happen where you could just live your life.
One of the big differences, and I'm probably one of the least qualified people to talk about constitutional law, but just philosophically as an American, between the U.S. and other countries, is the U.S. is a work in progress, is a living, breathing experiment in liberty and freedom and all these things that are so precious to us. The U.S. will actually arrive at inflection points in history, and people will stand up in the name of freedom and liberty and change things. And we're actually seeing a lashback, if I can use that word, in American society with credit reporting, for example. Like there's some huge legislation or some huge changes in the past couple of years to where lawsuit judgments are no longer allowed. Tax liens are no longer reported on American credit reports. In other words, our credit reporting has been moving in an opposite direction from, if we look at China, for example, with the social credit score, I believe Americans would not stand for it.
And if you, I hope not. I hope not.
And if you're in China, you probably don't have a choice. Like we read these news articles recently that people keep disappearing in China. And like, this is the kind of stuff that should not happen in the United States, right?
Right. Well, and that's can we put the privacy genie back in the bottle? I would hope that we can, because there is pushback. And interestingly enough, on the legislation, Marsha Blackburn, who is running for, she had proposed legislation that apparently would hold privacy standards to Google and Facebook, and not, and coincidentally, her ads were being suppressed or censored on those platforms because they didn't want her campaign to have that kind of promotion on their platform, because it was not in their self-interest if her legislation goes through. And then another question I want to have for you, I think in her legislation is moving it from the FCC to the FTC, to the Federal Trade Commission. So I'd ask you what your thoughts on that are, too.
I'm really going to sound not like a ex-Democrat right now and say that whenever you get the government trying to meddle in this stuff, they usually manage to mess it up. No offense against my government friends. There's many things that the government does very well, but running social media networks and intervening in technology business is not one of them. I'll give you a very brief example of a FTC action that I think was overdone. I had a friend in Los Angeles that used to run an affiliate network. This is a advertising network, who was running advertising offers that had a pre-checked box, meaning the person at the time they decided whether or not to opt in, the box was already selected and you had to deselect it if you didn't want to opt in. Fine, this is like a nuance of a internet advertising offer. Well, because the FTC didn't like the pre-checked box, or someone at the FTC decided that the pre-checked box was deceptive, they actually sent the FBI to go raid the guy's office and take away all of his computers, and made a big scene in front of all of his 40 or more employees, because they had to send federal government law enforcement in to take away all of his computers and make a big scene to show all the other internet marketers that they better be careful about not using a pre-checked box. And of course, there was not much to this FTC action. This is the Federal Trade Commission action. They gave him his computers back a few months later, and they just wrote him a letter that said, please don't make offers on the internet with pre-checked boxes. It's just an example of how overbearing a federal government agency can be. They don't have the resources to go out and engage in dialogue with all these internet marketers, so they try to fix it with a scorched earth action. And I get worried when we talk about because let's face it, what they want to do is scare all the internet marketers into being more careful, right? And it has that effect. Now, not to say the FTC doesn't do important work. They do important work. They do great work in many ways. But this sort of scorched earth, commando style, heavy-handed enforcement, to me, is un-American. And I don't think the current president of the United States will stand for that sort of thing. I think Donald Trump is anti-FTC heavy-handed tactics. I've heard him say as much. None of us want to see deceptive offers out there on the internet. And so it's good that they're around to that extent. But to answer your question, to move certain types of internet regulation away from the FCC over to the FTC, I would just hope it's not kicking the can down the road in terms of taking one agency that's proven to not always understand the intricacies of internet marketing and move it over to another one. I try to be the ultimate optimist about all of this. Eric Schmidt, the former, I believe, executive chairman or some sort of bigwig at Google, he used to hang around our Democrat circles quite a bit. 2013, 14, I was around him a little bit in DC and New York. Are you familiar with some of the recent things that have been discussed about Eric Schmidt?
I know to the extent of, was there a finding with China and his relationship with them of China having a backdoor to our technology?
Yeah.
And that there's that they were spying by putting some microchip in, and Google is maybe working with this Dragonfly project as that would, I don't know if the intent was to move it to the U.S. or what, but certainly involved in that China market, right?
This is just an opinion of one person. This is not an official statement anyway. It's just an opinion. I believe a lot of these Democrat Party players, and I'm not naming any of them by name, but I believe they're doing things for money. And look, I will not ever discourage anyone from running a clean, legitimate business and earning a living.
Right.
But if you're an American executive, okay, I don't care if you're Eric Schmidt or anyone else, what the heck are you doing earning huge amounts of money by installing backdoors with the Chinese, if indeed it is that's what you're doing? You need to take a reality check and look in the mirror and say, what in the world am I doing? We have serious national security issues with these people. I can say that my former good friend and colleague, Marco Lopez, spoke publicly. He was the chief of staff at Customs and Border Protection. He spoke publicly about detecting pinhole cameras coming into the United States in picture frame devices that were being sent from China. And apparently DHS did some engineering, reverse engineering of these. And look, this was explained to me that it's not classified information. I do not believe it's classified information. I believe it's been spoken about publicly. The pinhole cameras that were stuck in electronic picture frames from China were transmitting data back to unknown servers in China, and they were being distributed around the United States by the hundreds of thousands of devices. What in the world are we doing as a nation if we're allowing our executives to cut business deals with China that ultimately will result in the capturing and analysis of Americans talking in the privacy of their own homes or offices in a way that is secret? I have to question anyone who's doing that. I've heard that there are programmers that are leaving Google in protest of Google Dragonfly, and I believe it. I have a number of very good friends that work at Google in different divisions, and I've heard in recent weeks that this rumor is actually true. And so, yeah, the Democratic Party in the United States, in my opinion, is crumbling. They may have the ability to attract some votes right now in the current elections. I don't know. I'm not a political person, but knowing the inner foundation of the Democratic Party, watching the 10-year cycle myself, I think they're a bunch of fools. I think they're run by a fool, Tom Perez, who is a fake Hispanic. He said, I'm not Hispanic. My Spanish is better than his. I know Tom. I don't think he's a good leader. I did at one point. That's why I gave the party money. But their finances are in disarray, the way I see it, and they're just unable to be the same party they were in prior years. And you see the people that are associated with them. What are they doing? They're cutting business deals with Mexico. They're cutting business deals with China, and we have to ask ourselves the question: why? We're coming up on 30 minutes right now. Tamara, I just want to revisit your deplatforming experience on Twitter for a minute. If we can, and
sure.
Compare that to some of the other stories we've been hearing recently. To me, it's just painfully obvious that you were shut down because you're conservative. How does that feel to you, just as an American? Okay. Well, we'll get back into that in the next episode. Let me tell you how it feels to me as an American. I think when you have social media that is deplatforming people simply because of a conservative political view, it just feels strange. And so that's why we set out to take a technology project that was already under development for some time, that was mobile.co, and pivot it over to address some of the things that are happening in social media right now that need to be fixed. One of the things that needs to be fixed is legitimate political conversations, regardless of the persuasion, liberal, conservative, whatever. To the extent they are legitimate conversations, look, people ought not to be deplatformed. Yes, there is such a thing in the world as hate speech. It's weird. None of us want to see legitimate, there is no legitimate hate speech. None of us want to see actual hate speech. Actual hate speech is a very ugly thing. And the people I have met over the past year, as I have been involved with some conservative political circles, are not hate speech people. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, my battery died. I had a quick plug in.
That's okay. I was just explaining. Look, there is such a thing in the world as hate speech. It's very ugly. None of us like it. But it is as wrong for liberals to label conservative political views as hate speech as it would be for us to say that, for example, Democrats are a bunch of people that are just turn around, for us to start shutting down Democrat accounts and saying their views are not legitimate because they seldom result in profits, right? There's a bunch of Democrats that are not very good at running businesses, but we won't go there tonight. As long as the conversations as long as the point of view adds something to the conversation, as long as it is not abusive. I've been reading Canadian law recently. I've been very interested in Canada. Canada actually has a designation around hate speech that says, in order to be convicted for hate speech, in one of the laws, the result has to be actual violence. I mean, that might be a pretty good test. Incidentally, I see images all the time in social media of Democrat protests where they're throwing rocks and breaking windows. That to me looks like violence. I don't see conservatives doing that. But look, we are not engaged in hate speech, and to be labeled as such is inaccurate and unproductive. There was the walkaway campaign just recently in DC, Tamara, right? Was that
there was? Yes, this last weekend, and there were many people who I am connected with on Twitter and through other endeavors with our political alliances around supporting President Trump in the midterm elections with the MAGA people, the MAGA candidates, and the walkaway. And so there are a number of those who have been shut down or suspended or censored who are part of this walkaway. And the walkaway movement is those who are seeing, kind of like what you've talked about, the realization that the Democratic Party is not what it purported to be or what it used to be, and blacks now are like Blexit, the exit from the black Democratic Party, walkaway people, the liberals, the person who started it, Brendan, I'm trying to think of what his last name was, but Straka, he started the, Straka. Yeah, there you go, thank you. I could picture him. Started because he actually discovered, the more he looked into it, the less he really agreed with and it was partly around the speech issue, that the left was the one who had become intolerant of open ideas, and the left had become unyielding to their way or the highway. Their party blindly accepting whatever the party leadership was doing and not really putting together with the reality of what had become the Democratic Party and the Democratic leaders to what its base believed and thought. And so they are walking away, and I would say and hope that they are not just walking away from that party, but that they are walking to MAGA and realizing that as Americans we are all united in our wanting to have our freedoms. If we value that, we can be in agreement on that. And I'd like to just say, I was listening to President Trump's speech today about the border wall and the immigration policy, and what Trump has done successfully is that he puts these issues that both parties, the Republicans are guilty of as well, kicking that can down the road of not really wanting to solve the problems, because that's Congress's job to fix it. And Trump has said it's the problem with the laws. Congress's job is to fix the laws if they aren't working right. So we have this crisis now down, whether it's manufactured, whatever you want to believe about the caravan that is down approaching our border and how it's being dealt with. And I thought Trump talked today about boundaries and protecting our border, and that we have to have a system of letting people in. And so I thought of the Me Too movement, which of course the Kavanaugh hearings kind of blew that all up in a whole different perspective of now we believe men, we believe women, but really the border of our country is not unlike relationship boundaries, and people see those as bad things, like, oh, a boundary around your relationships are bad. But no, there's healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not just to keep something out, but it's to protect what's inside as well. And so if we look at that in terms of relationships, the same thing for our country. It's to protect our country and our sovereignty.
You know, Tamara, I just have to say, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so appreciative of you being here. Look, we're going to do a bunch of things with mobile.co that have not been done in social media. Okay, it's not another platform that looks like the others. Mobile.co is not going to look like Twitter or Facebook or Gab or any of them. It's its own creature. It's a work in progress. You'll see it built in front of your very eyes if you start to follow us at mobile.co on the internet. I'm a former Democrat, to the extent anyone's interested. And if you're a Democrat and you're watching this, or if you're a liberal and you're watching this, look, it's not about us versus them. It's about being an American and a party that's broken. The Democrat Party is completely broken right now, okay? You need to ask yourself, look at these scandals. What in the world is going on with Fast and Furious? And look, whatever happened to vigorous debate? We're supposed to be a party of vigorous debate. We can't debate anymore. Democrats can't debate anymore. You either follow the party line or you are yelled at, you're ostracized, you're manipulated, you're punished. That is not the American way. Ask yourself, why was Eric Holder trafficking weapons into Mexico? Don't shut it out. Don't just look the other way and shut it out and say that's a Trump talking point. It's a very real thing. I have firsthand experience and knowledge with this. Our party, the Democrat Party, is involved in something very, very strange. It involves thousands of weapons being trafficked into Mexico to drug cartels, okay? This is a fact. This is not a theory. You have to ask yourself why. What is going on with the Clintons? My God, I gave these people a lot of money, okay? I was around them. I have sat many times at a dinner table with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's college roommate was actually involved in the Mobile.co project, Alan Burson. Alan, what is going on with Bill Clinton and Mexico and 60 people on the Clinton body count list that die because they get killed? And maybe one or two or three can be explained, but why do people that start questioning the Clintons disappear from the face of the earth? It's a very strange thing. I guess we're not supposed to talk about it, but as a curious person and as a Democrat, right, we're supposed to be, as a former Democrat, we're supposed to be bold and not afraid to speak. Let's question these people. I don't want to see them say that it's a dramatic conspiracy theory. It's a fact. There's like 60 dead people. Why? Okay, so it's very strange to me as a former Democrat. Weapons trafficking, people getting killed, the lack of vigorous debate in the party, the pressure. These are some of the things that Brandon Straka talks about with the walkaway movement. It's the reason why I walked away too. Look, I can do my small piece in terms of my capacity to try to bring fairness back to the online debate. Don't label this hate speech. None of us are interested in hate speech. We're interested in the truth, all right? We look forward to seeing you at mobile.co. I'm Jeffrey Peterson.